Throughout American history, the highest office in our nation has been a target. From the earliest days of our republic to the modern era, those who seek or hold the presidency have faced the ultimate threat. These are the stories of assassination attempts on U.S. presidents and candidates, the full stories of when democracy itself was under attack. January 30th, 1835. President Andrew Jackson, the fiery war hero known as Old Hickory, was leaving a funeral at the Capitol. Richard Lawrence, an unemployed house painter who believed he was the rightful king of England, approached the president. Lawrence pulled out a Derringer pistol and fired at point-blank range. The gun misfired. Lawrence pulled a second pistol and fired again. It also misfired. Jackson, true to his reputation, beat Lawrence with his walking cane. Lawrence was found not guilty by reason of insanity, becoming the first person to attempt to assassinate a sitting U.S. president. The incident highlighted the vulnerability of American leaders and the growing tensions of the era. April 14, 1865. President Abraham Lincoln, having just led the nation through its bloodiest conflict, sought a moment of peace. At Ford's Theater, Lincoln and his wife Mary were watching the comedy Our American Cousin. John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor and Confederate sympathizer, had been planning this moment for months. Booth believed killing Lincoln would revive the Confederate cause. At 10:15 p.m., during the play's funniest scene when the audience was laughing loudest, Booth entered the presidential box. He fired a single shot into the back of Lincoln's head. Lincoln died the next morning. Booth escaped, but was killed 12 days later. The assassination robbed America of the leader who might have healed the nation's wounds with malice toward none. Instead, his death ushered in a harsh reconstruction that deepened national divisions. July 2, 1881. President James A. Garfield, a former Civil War general and scholar, had been in office just 4 months. At the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station, Garfield was preparing to board a train for a summer vacation. Charles J. Guiteau, a delusional office seeker who believed Garfield owed him a government position, had been stalking the president. Guiteau approached from behind and fired 2 shots into Garfield's back. 1 bullet grazed his arm, but the second lodged near his spine. For 79 agonizing days, doctors tried to save Garfield's life, but their unsanitary practices likely made his condition worse. Garfield died on September 19, 1881, not from the bullet, but from infection and medical malpractice. Guiteau was executed, claiming to the end that the doctors, not he, had killed the president. Garfield's death led to major civil service reforms, ending the corrupt spoil system that had motivated his killer. September 6, 1901. President William McKinley was at the height of his popularity, celebrating American prosperity at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo. The exposition showcased America's emergence as a world power, with electric lights illuminating the Rainbow City. At the Temple of Music, McKinley was greeting the public in a receiving line. Leon Czolgosz, a 28-year-old anarchist and factory worker, had been radicalized by economic inequality. Czolgosz approached with his right hand bandaged, concealing a .32 caliber revolver. As McKinley extended his hand in greeting, Czolgosz fired 2 shots into the president's abdomen. McKinley initially seemed to recover, even asking that Czolgosz not be harmed. But gangrene set in, and McKinley died 8 days later on September 14, 1901. His death brought Theodore Roosevelt to power, ushering in the progressive era and changing America forever. October 14, 1912. Former President Theodore Roosevelt was running for an unprecedented 3rd term as a Progressive Party candidate. In Milwaukee, Roosevelt was leaving the Hotel Gilpatrick for a campaign speech when John Flammonge Schrank approached. Schrank, a delusional saloon keeper, believed the ghost of William McKinley had told him to kill Roosevelt. Schrank fired a single shot from his .38 caliber revolver into Roosevelt's chest. The bullet was slowed by Roosevelt's steel eyeglass case, and his 50-page speech folded in his breast pocket. Roosevelt, bleeding but unbowed, insisted on delivering his 90-minute speech, declaring, "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose." The crowd was electrified by his courage, but Roosevelt lost the election, splitting the Republican vote. Doctors decided the bullet was too dangerous to remove, and Roosevelt carried it for the rest of his life. February 15, 1933. President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt was in Miami, giving an impromptu speech from his open car. The nation was in the depths of the Great Depression, and Roosevelt was promising a new deal for America. Giuseppe Zangara, an unemployed bricklayer with chronic stomach pain, blamed his suffering on politicians and the wealthy. Standing on a wobbly chair because of his short stature, Zangara fired 5 shots at Roosevelt's car. The shots missed Roosevelt but struck 5 bystanders, including Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak. Cermak died 3 weeks later, telling Roosevelt, "I'm glad it was me instead of you." Zangara was executed just 33 days later, one of the fastest executions in American history. Roosevelt went on to lead America through the Depression and World War II, transforming the presidency forever. November 1st, 1950. President Harry Truman was living in Blair House while the White House was being renovated. 2 Puerto Rican nationalists, Griselio Torresola and Oscar Collazo, planned to assassinate Truman to draw attention to Puerto Rican independence. They approached Blair House from different directions, armed with German Lugers. A fierce gunfight erupted with Secret Service agents and White House police. Officer Leslie Koffel was mortally wounded but managed to kill Torresola before dying. Truman, hearing the gunfire, looked out his bedroom window but was quickly pulled back by security. Collazo was wounded and captured. He was sentenced to death, but Truman commuted it to life in prison. November 22, 1963. President John F. Kennedy was in Dallas, Texas, trying to heal political divisions within the Democratic Party. The presidential motorcade was making its way through Dealey Plaza, with Kennedy and Jackie waving to enthusiastic crowds. From the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, Lee Harvey Oswald had positioned himself with a rifle. Oswald, a former Marine and Communist sympathizer, had a history of violence and instability. At 12:30 p.m., as the motorcade slowed to navigate the plaza, Oswald fired 3 shots. The shots were captured on film by Abraham Zapruder, creating the most analyzed footage in history. Kennedy was rushed to Parkland Hospital, but the wounds were fatal. He was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. Vice President Lyndon Johnson was sworn in as president aboard Air Force One, with a blood-stained Jackie Kennedy at his side. Oswald was arrested that afternoon, but he would never stand trial. 2 days later, nightclub owner Jack Ruby shot and killed Oswald on live television, silencing him forever. Kennedy's assassination traumatized the nation and marked the end of American innocence. Despite official investigations, questions about the assassination continue to haunt American history. June 5, 1968. Senator Robert F. Kennedy had just won the California Democratic primary, putting him on track for the presidential nomination. At the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, Kennedy was celebrating his victory with supporters and campaign staff. Kennedy had just delivered his victory speech, speaking of healing America's divisions and ending the Vietnam War. Taking a shortcut through the hotel's kitchen pantry, Kennedy was shaking hands with hotel workers. Sirhan Sirhan, a 24-year-old Palestinian immigrant, was waiting in the pantry with a .22 caliber revolver. Sirhan fired 8 shots at close range, striking Kennedy in the head and back. Kennedy fell to the floor, his blood pooling on the kitchen tiles as supporters screamed in horror. For 26 hours, the nation prayed as Kennedy fought for his life at Good Samaritan Hospital. On June 6, 1968, Robert Kennedy died, leaving America to wonder what might have been. His funeral train carried him to Arlington Cemetery, as millions of Americans lined the tracks to say goodbye. With both Kennedy brothers dead, America lost its most powerful voices for civil rights and peace. February 1974. President Richard Nixon, already embattled by Watergate, faced another threat when Samuel Bike planned to hijack a plane and crash it into the White House. Bick, an unemployed tire salesman, stormed a Delta Airlines flight at Baltimore-Washington International Airport. After killing a security guard and the pilot, Bike was shot dead by police before the plane could take off. September 5, 1975. President Gerald Ford faced the first of 2 assassination attempts in California. In Sacramento, Lynette "Squeaky" Fromm, a follower of Charles Manson, pointed a gun at Ford from 2 feet away. The gun didn't fire because Fromm had failed to chamber a round. Just 17 days later, Sarah Jane Moore fired a shot at Ford outside the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco. A bystander deflected her aim, and the bullet missed Ford by inches. May 5, 1979. President Jimmy Carter was giving a speech in Los Angeles when Raymond Lee Harvey was arrested with a starter pistol. Harvey, who had been hired to create a distraction, was arrested before he could carry out any plan. March 30, 1981. President Ronald Reagan had been in office just 69 days when he spoke to a labor union at the Washington Hilton Hotel. As Reagan left the hotel, he was in high spirits, joking with reporters and waving to the crowd. John Hinckley Jr., a 25-year-old drifter obsessed with actress Jodie Foster, was waiting in the crowd. Hinckley fired 6 shots in 1.7 seconds from a .22 caliber revolver. A ricocheting bullet struck Reagan under his left arm, puncturing his lung and stopping inches from his heart. 3 others were wounded, including Press Secretary James Brady, who was permanently disabled. Reagan walked into George Washington University Hospital under his own power, joking to his wife Nancy, "Honey, I forgot to duck." His grace under pressure and quick recovery boosted his popularity and strengthened his presidency. Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity and was institutionalized for over 30 years. The shooting led to the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, requiring background checks for gun purchases. April 1993. Former President George H.W. Bush was visiting Kuwait to commemorate the Gulf War victory. Iraqi intelligence agents planned to assassinate Bush with a car bomb during his visit. The FBI discovered the plot, and President Clinton ordered missile strikes on Iraqi intelligence headquarters in retaliation. October 29, 1994. President Bill Clinton was living in Blair House while the White House was being renovated. Francisco Martin Duran fired 29 rounds from a semi-automatic rifle at the White House from Pennsylvania Avenue. Duran, an upholsterer from Colorado, believed Clinton was corrupt and needed to be stopped. Clinton was inside watching a football game and was unharmed, but the incident led to increased White House security. May 10, 2005, President George W. Bush was speaking in Tbilisi, Georgia, when Vladimir Arutunian threw a live grenade toward the stage. The grenade landed just 65 feet from Bush and Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili, but failed to explode. Arutunian, who opposed American influence in Georgia, was later captured and sentenced to life in prison. 2008 to 2016. President Barack Obama faced more threats than any president in modern history, receiving over 30 death threats per day. The Secret Service investigated over 11,000 threats against Obama, many motivated by racial hatred. In 2014, Omar Gonzalez jumped the White House fence and made it inside the building before being tackled. Multiple individuals sent ricin-laced letters to Obama, including actress Shannon Richardson and James Duchke. The Obama presidency also saw new types of threats, including drones landing on White House grounds. June 18, 2016. During the presidential campaign, Michael Stephen Sanford attempted to grab a police officer's gun at a Trump rally in Las Vegas. Sanford, a British citizen, planned to shoot Trump but was immediately tackled by security. He was sentenced to prison and later deported to the United Kingdom. July 13, 2024. At a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, Thomas Matthew Crooks opened fire from a nearby rooftop. Crooks, a 20-year-old from Pennsylvania, fired multiple shots with an AR-15-style rifle. Trump was grazed by a bullet on his ear, 1 rally attendee was killed, and 2 others were critically wounded. Secret Service counter-snipers killed Crooks within seconds of his attack. Trump's defiant response, raising his fist and shouting "Fight," became an iconic moment in American political history. Throughout American history, our democracy has faced its greatest test not on foreign battlefields, but in the moments when violence threatened our highest office. From Andrew Jackson's defiance to Ronald Reagan's humor, these leaders showed that American democracy cannot be destroyed by a single act of violence. Each attack led to stronger security measures, but also raised questions about the balance between protection and accessibility. The true victory over political violence comes not from perfect security, but from citizens who remain committed to democratic values. These assassination attempts remind us that democracy is fragile, but also that it has survived its darkest moments. The leaders we lost to violence are remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived and served. In the end, the peaceful transfer of power remains America's greatest achievement and our strongest defense against those who would destroy our democracy. The story of assassination attempts on American leaders is ultimately a story of democracy's resilience and the price of freedom.